Hey people, it's Steel Gamer, and welcome to the second video I said I was going to make, which is a follow-up to the first video about how people are incorrectly applying the math. And I was going to actually use a real math problem that was given to people who have the thinking pattern of the way people on the forum and in this game apply the math to it, and every one of them got it wrong. So I'm going to go over a few things first before getting into that, and I'm going to explain some very basic stuff that breaks down and explains to people why closing a rift early and going into the next one does not actually accumulate more items if you're comparing it to somebody who clears out a rift. So I'll be using very low numbers for this, and then you take what I'm about to say, what I'm going to explain, and then you basically use your mind. You do the numbers, because the system I'm going to explain is just using two items, and that's it. So this is again toward items in a rift, a Nephilim rift, not a greater rift, just a Nephilim rift. So the first thing I want to get out of the way is, again, I'll be beating a dead horse with this, meaning I will consistently repeat myself to get the point across, simply because people are so brainwashed about how this works that they actually can't do the math correctly, even though they think they are, because they decide that they're only going to use one part of an equation that actually requires two parts, which I'll explain afterwards as well. So the first thing I'm going to get out of the way is the statements that people try to use in this game are absolutely idiotic. Trying to say, it's like the keystone argument, which I'll get into because that's technically the same thing when people are arguing this point. When you're trying to compare how many things you have to another person in a game, or anybody doing that, such as keystones, which I'll start off with, it's the most moronic statement I've ever heard in any game, simply because you have no concept to how many keystones another player is getting, so you don't even have a number to compare it to. So trying to say you get more keystones in an hour, or somebody gets more keystones in an hour compared to somebody else, is absolutely stupid. Because what number are you basing your number from? You have to know how many keystones somebody else got, how many runs it took them to get it, and how many keystones dropped in that run to even make that type of comparison, which nobody has. The second part is how fast or slow somebody does something. That is another stupid comment and another idiotic argument that people try to use, because an hour of playtime is an hour of playtime. Whether you accumulate that hour in one sitting or you accumulate it over a week does not change. It's an hour of playtime. If both players do roughly the same amount of runs in that hour playtime, people trying to base their entire argument off of 1 hour straight is moronic, because you cannot possibly know how many keystones somebody got over an hour time frame and then say, I got more than you just because you did it in one sitting. That brings me to the following point about trying to dictate how many keystones somebody gets, because how fast or slow somebody does something does not change the fact, and nobody can control how many keystones are dropping in the friggin' run. And I am really getting tired of people who ignore you can do less runs and take longer to do them and get more keystones than somebody who does more runs in less time. So again, the math breaks down like this. If you're going to use an hour of playtime, then we're not going to go by an hour sitting or two people doing it side by side. We're going an overall hour of playtime. If somebody in one sitting in an hour does 5 runs, and only 2 keystones drop in every single one of those runs, the person who just did 5 runs in an hour sitting only got friggin' 10 keystones, period. That is the math on that. You aren't going to change that. Now, if they did 5 runs over the course of 10 hours and only 2 keystones dropped, guess what? You still only have friggin' 10 keystones. The time you did it in doesn't change the amount you got. That's the end of discussion on that end of it. If you take somebody who does 4 runs over 3 weeks' time, guess what? An hour over 3 weeks is the same exact thing as an hour in one sitting. One person did 4 runs and the other did 5 runs. The person who did 5 runs only got 10 keystones because only 2 dropped per run. Now, if the person that did 4 runs, that is less runs than somebody doing 5. and the person that did 4 runs, let's say, got 3 keystones per drop. That is a total of 12 keystones. 4 runs is less than 5, and 12 keystones is more than 10. Somebody can do less runs, take longer to do them, and get more keystones than somebody who does more runs in less time. Or sorry, not less time, but in one sitting. Period. So this whole crap about that's not math or that doesn't work like that makes you an idiot. Because that is absolutely 100% feasible, because it has happened and will happen again. So even arguing the fact that more runs gets you more keystones is false, because you don't have any concept or control over how many keystones drop in those runs. How many keystones drop in the runs is the issue, not how fast you do them and not how many runs you do. Now, we're not people are going to get stupid and say, well, if I do 15 runs and you only do 2, don't be stupid. We're not talking about that. We're talking about 2 people who roughly do the same, almost, 1 run or 2 off. So don't start being stupid with this. That brings me to the point on items in a rift. All of you clowns, and I'm calling you clowns because you don't understand math, love trying to apply addition to a subtraction problem, and I'll be using the actual problem on a math test to prove why it's not an addition problem, it's actually subtraction. Because again, this problem I'm going to point out was an actual problem on a math test that was given to the people who think the way you guys do, and every one of you got it wrong. And there was no talking to you guys. So let me start off by saying closing a rift early or keeping it open has no relevance to this. Doing it in 15 minutes or doing it in 5 has no relevance to it. A rift has a certain amount of items, and I'm going to use the number 2 as a factor on this. So 2 people go into a rift. One person spends 2 minutes in it and picks up one of the items because they want to get to the next rift. One person A, goes into the rift, spends 2 minutes, gets an item, and then leaves to open another rift. But yet the rift has 2 items. Now, the second person, person B, goes into a rift, spends 10 minutes to get both items. Okay. The point that people are going to try to argue with is, well, you're in there for 10 minutes. I've already done 50 another rift. That's not a valid argument, because that has nothing to do with how many items you pick up or how many items are in the rift. If a rift has 2 items, okay, again, you can't revert how one sitting of time overrides somebody doing the same, taking the same amount of time over a different time span. Both of you spent the same amount of time in the damn rift. How many runs you did isn't relevant. How many items you picked up in the rift actually is relevant in accordance to how many runs you did. So here is the deal. Let's say all rifts had 2 items. And in this, we're going to use an hour time frame because that's what people do. So we're going to take one person getting 1 item out of every rift, and we're going to do 3 rifts. And then we're going to take a second person doing 3 rifts, getting both items, taking 15 hours to do it. Okay? So, in the end, both players ran 3 rifts. Period. Doesn't matter whether you take 15 hours or not. One sitting doesn't change that. If person A goes into the rift and picks up one of the 2 items and then goes to the next rift, and the person that picks up both items out of the rift starts their next rift, the person that picked up both items starts the next rift with the 1 additional item that the person who only picked up 1 does. So, the person who closes the rift early is missing an item. All they're doing now is when both players go into the next rift, doesn't matter whether you're doing it in one setting. Now I'm comparing the players going into their next rift. One person starts off with 1 item, one person starts off with 2 items. In the next rift, the person that has 2 items picks up an additional item and now has 3 items, whereas the person who only has 1 item is now picking up the second item, and they're still behind the person here. Closing a rift early does not get you more items. What gets you more items is how many items you pick up that the rift has to offer. Then, furthermore, onto the third rift. Now that the first person A picked up in the first rift picked up 1 item closed the rift, went to the next rift, picked up one item, closed to the next rift, picked up one item. They have gotten 3 items out of 3 rifts, while the second person has gotten 6 items out of 3 rifts. Closing a rift early does not get you more items. The person that clears the rift winds up with more items. That is a mathematical fact. Trying to say you cleared more rifts in an hour time frame than somebody over 15 isn't a valid argument, because eventually, while you're logged out and this person's logged in, they're going to catch up to the amount of rifts you did. And if this person is clearing rifts, it's not relevant how many things you did, how many rifts you partially cleared in an hour. This person is going to surpass you on items. Period. That is the way the math works, because you're only picking up 1 item compared to this person's 2. This person may have taken longer, but in the end, once they equate the amount of rifts that they have, you are never going to be able to catch up to the amount of items they have, because what you have here is a 3-item gap. You need 3 items. Person A now needs 3 items to catch up to the amount of items person B has already gotten. Now, in the next rift, when this person goes in here, you can do 3 rifts quicker. But if this person keeps picking up 2 items, your gap between how many items you need to catch up to him to actually surpass how many items they have becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, here is why this is a subtraction problem. People in the game take the items that they pick up and use that as how many items they're getting. And that is not where your total comes from. The total is actually the number of items that the rift has off. When you pick up something from a rift and put it in your inventory, it doesn't change the amount of items that the rift gives off, because now you're just having the items between you and the rift. But when you remove it from the rift, you're subtracting it from the rift and placing it into your inventory. Sure, you're adding it to your inventory, but it's not becoming more items. It's still 100. You're just moving where that number is. So the rift has a smaller number of items, while your number of items doesn't really grow because you don't have anything, you're not adding anything to your pool. You're just moving it, while the rift's pile is becoming lower. Now, how can that be possible? Technically, you are putting it in your inventory, but where you're putting it, where it's coming from is where the subtraction is. You're not adding it to your inventory, you're subtracting it from the rift's inventory. And the rift cannot be removed from the equation. People are always trying to say, well, the items in the rift don't matter. That's false, because without the rift, you don't have any items. Period. You're magically just showing items up, and this is why the rift items have to be included. So the number that actually matters is how many items you're not picking up, not how many items you've accumulated from the portion of total items. So the items in your inventory are not a total. They're a portion of the total, because the total is actually the items in the inventory and the rift itself. Now, obviously, there's no way to determine how many items a rift has, because that's really not possible. So this is the math equation this is the math problem I'm going to give you that shows you why it's a subtraction problem and not an addition problem, because the number doesn't come from how many items are in your inventory. The number of items comes between the difference between how many items are left in the rift. So here is the math problem again, and I'm going to beat a dead horse with this and repeat it. This problem I'm about to explain to you or say was an actual math problem on a test that was given to people who do math the way they do this in Diablo and do this. So basically, it's the same exact thinking pattern, and they do the math the same way, and every single one of them got it wrong, and they couldn't figure out why. And that is because they don't apply the math to they're applying their own math to it instead of actually looking at how the problem is set up and how the math is actually done. So here is the actual question, or I should say the word problem. Okay. A hotel clerk has a room to rent. And the hotel clerk is going on break, and he leaves, a desk clerk in charge. A hotel manager has, I'll say a hotel manager. Hotel manager has a room to rent. So he goes off to lunch and leaves a hotel clerk in charge. While the hotel manager was at lunch, 3 people come in and they want to rent a room. So the hotel clerk says, yes, it's $30. So each one of the people that are in this room pay $10 a piece. 10 plus 10 plus 10 is 30. So they give the guy $30 and they go upstairs. In the meantime, the hotel manager comes back from lunch and asks the hotel clerk, did you rent the room? And the hotel clerk says, yes, I did. And he asks, how much did you rent it for? The hotel clerk says, I rented it for $30. The hotel manager says, no, the room's only $25. I want you to go back up and give these guys $5. So the hotel clerk's on the way upstairs and he says, wait a minute. 3 guys cannot divide $5 evenly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pocket 2 of those dollars. And I'm going to give the guys each back $1. So now what happens is the guy, each one of these members originally that paid $10 for the room have now paid $9 for the room because he gives them back $1. 9 times 3 guys is $27. Plus the 2 in the clerk's pocket equals $29. What happened to the other extra $1? That's the actual math question that every single person who applies the math in Diablo to how they're getting the rifts done incorrect. And I will explain why people are having a problem getting that right. All of the money is accounted for, so where the hell is the extra $1? And that is because it's not an addition problem. It's a subtraction problem that if you apply the math subtraction, if you apply a subtraction formula to this, you'll get the correct answer. But if you apply an addition formula to this, you're going to get an incorrect answer. The addition formula being applied is people applying the addition to what they're putting in their inventory instead of subtracting what is actually in the rift. Now, in this case, here is the comparison. What changes the problem is me saying plus the 2 in his pocket. So yes, originally 3 guys paid $10 each. And when they get $1 back, 10 minus 1 is 9. So what happens is you minus $1 from 10, and that becomes 9. 9 times 3 is 27. But you don't say plus the 2 in the guy's pocket. You have to subtract the 2 in the clerk's pocket, which brings the total down to 25 instead of adding it. 29 added, adding 2 gets you to a total that can't happen. It's an incorrect math figure because you're doing the math wrong. You have to subtract it to get the right number. Now, when you're dealing with the rift, people are only adding the 2 in the pocket, which is the pocket in this case would be people's inventory. So they're getting the math wrong. You have to subtract what is in your inventory from the total. You have to subtract what's in your inventory from the total amount that was in the rift in order to get the correct figure. That's as simple as that. So the fact is, what I just explained with the 2 items on the rift and the time frames and everything else prove closing rifts more often will never amount to somebody who's clearing the rifts, period. Furthermore, items come from variables. And an even simpler solution to explain why somebody who clears a rift is going to wind up with more items than somebody who doesn't is simply because when items come from variables, variables being monsters, breakable objects, and whatever else. Then you add nemesis braces into this, and now you have an even bigger, more items. But the point here is that the simple fact that somebody who clears out an entire rift is just going to encounter more variables than somebody who's clearing out part of these rifts. Now, for people who are still having a problem wrapping your head around this, let me put it to you this way. Let's say all rifts had 6 levels. And you're only clearing out, one person is only clearing out 2 levels in 3 rifts. So they have cleared out a total of 6 levels. But clearing out a total of 6 levels is not the same thing as clearing out 1 rift with all 6 levels, simply because 1 rift in all 6 levels has entirely way more variables to encounter, which means they're going to wind up with more objects than somebody clearing out partially on these rifts. Furthermore, when you only clear out 2 levels, and let's say it's a base fact that you can count this, you will get a minimal of 10 items per level of every rift, whether it's gold, death breast, whatever. It's still 10 items. You can't go through a level of a rift and not get 10 items. It's impossible. So if all rifts have 6 levels, and each level will produce a minimal of 10 items, that's a total of at least 60 items you're going to wind up with clearing a rift. What happens here is somebody that only clears 2 levels of 3 rifts, 2 levels in 3 rifts, will wind up with a total of 60 items, 20, 40, 60. But the person who clears out all the rifts, at every level of a rift, is going to wind up with 60 for the first rift, then 60 more for the second rift, and then 60 more for the third rift. So it's actually 180 items compared to 60. 60 minus 180 is 120. So the person that clears out all rifts, you cannot possibly have more items by clearing out less levels on a rift. It's impossible. Because like I said, eventually when you log out, the person that's clearing everything is going to catch up to the same amount of rifts you just did and surpass you in items. It's that simple. So this whole crap about, I cleared this out in an hour and I'm sitting there doing this, is not, you can't factor it in. Because eventually you're going to log out and this person's going to continue playing and they're just going to surpass you in items. So you will never be able to catch up on that gap no matter how many rifts you close, no matter how many rifts you do. Furthermore, to complicate the matter even worse, is that if you do not clear out a rift, you are potentially missing primal. Because a primal can come from anywhere. And unless you go through every single legendary on the level in that rift, you have no clue if you would have missed a primal. So that's the other issue. But to really complicate the matter, let me throw this math at you on this. If all rifts have 6 levels, hypothetically, all rifts have 6 levels, and each level, we'll say, is a total of 10 items each. Closing a rift on level 2, instead of going through the rest of the levels, leaves 40 items behind. Now, you take 40 items that you left behind, and you subtract the amount of items you did pick up, and that is the amount of items you need to make up before you can actually equate clearing out the amount of levels in a rift. So, for example, you have 20 items and you left 40. You would literally need 20 items to make up for that 40 because you have 20. You can't count what's there. So you have 20 and minus 20. You would need 20 more to equate the missing amount. It's as simple as that. So that is how the math works. That is exactly why people who try to apply this math with just the addition and what they're talking about is the +2 in the pocket instead of the -2 in his pocket, because they're looking at it wrong, which gives you a completely different figure and an incorrect figure if you do it addition, but gives you the right figure if you do it in subtraction. Again, that is a real problem on a real test. You can look it up, and that was given to people, and every person who, I'm not saying it was given to people, I should clarify, it's not given to people who thought wrong. It was just given to people, and people who thought the way people do in the forum got it wrong. Every person who thought it was an addition problem got it wrong. And everybody in this game thinks that picking items out of a rift is an addition problem. It's not. It's a subtraction problem. And that's the correct way to look at it. And that's how you do it. So that's the reality behind the math. That's how the math gets applied. Now, if you want to argue with this, then you're just an idiot, because I just very explicitly broke it down in detail on how it doesn't matter if you do it in an hour or sitting, fast or slow. 100 items is 100 items. It's not going to change. The rift amount isn't going to change just because you do it fast or slow. So again, recapping real fast with this. If a rift has 2 items and somebody goes in and picks up, if you go in and you spend 2 minutes getting 1 item, and you put the item in your inventory and there's 1 in your rift, how many freaking items are there? There's still 2. How fast you just picked up that 1 item doesn't alter how many items there are. There's still freaking 2. If you do it if you pick up 1 item over an hour, there's still freaking 2 items. Doing it in 15 seconds, there's still freaking 2 items. I don't understand how people are equating speed to getting more or less. The amount of items is what is set. You can't change that. And again, just to recap on the Keystone argument, I get more. More than what? What number do you have? What number are you actually using to compare yourself to somebody else when you don't even have the data that somebody else has? So if 2 people I got more runs than you because I did more keys or whatever. Okay, over the course of a season, if you did 500 runs and did them in a week, and somebody did 500 runs over the course of a season, both of these friggin' did 500 runs. For you to say you have more keystones than somebody else, you would not only know how many runs they actually completed, but how many keystones dropped in those runs, because you can get kicked out of a game before you get the keystones, and it still counts as a run. This is like what I said earlier. Sitting in the lobby counts as time played. Players can't dictate what they want time played to be when the game records it how the game records it. So, again, this is a stupid argument that people do that they are using to try to manipulate the wording on things where they're just arguing to argue. So, this video basically just shows the stupidity level and the education level of people on the forum and in this game who want to bicker and argue. Shut the hell up, step back, look at how I just explained the math, and realize you're doing it wrong. I am right and you're wrong. It's as simple as that. And that is because I applied the math correctly. You did not. So, if you're going to argue after I just explained it, you're an idiot. So, that's all I have to say on this. And it's TL Gamer signing off. Have a good day, internet guys, wherever you are.